If you know anything about Vaxi, you know that they make some of the best esports mice on the market. And teaming up together with Pulsar to form the new ES lineup, they are now starting with the FS1, which is highly inspired by the original FK2 from Zowie. You might ask yourself, why is that? But that is because one of the co-owners, Sanver, back then invented the FK2 shape. So with this mouse pretty much being his love letter to what he created that many years ago, it's not only time to find out whether it's worth your hard-earned money, but also if they succeeded with the task of creating a remastered version of that mouse. Before we get into the video, I do want to mention that this unit was sent out to me by Max Gaming. Huge shout out to them for doing so, and if you want to get one yourself, check out the link down in the description below. But rest assured, my thoughts and opinions are not purchasable and will always be my own. And also do keep in mind that reviews are mainly subjective and that you might not view things the same way that I do. I also really do want to mention that if you've at all been enjoying the content so far, definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it. And let's get straight into the unboxing experience. First of all, you need to take off a sleeve off the cardboard, and then you see your mouse in here with the receiver on top. The receiver is the same as the Saiwu mouse that I have just reviewed. It has two LED indicators here on the front and also micro switches on top. And if you want to know more details about it or hear what these switches actually sound like, you can check out my full review of the Saiwu mouse up here in the top right corner. Inside of the box, you get a color-matched USB-A to USB-C cable with a kink here on the USB-C part. And also the cable is rather stiff, but not super rigid. You get your usual collector's card, some paperwork, a sticker, and honestly, at this price tag, having no mouse grips and no spare skates or anything like that is definitely a letdown. Getting into what Vaxi is most known for, build quality and mouse engineering. My unit here is incredibly rigid. I cannot get it to flex anywhere. There is a tiny bit of button wobbling when pressing towards the very rear of the mouse buttons, but that is quite normal. And there is no side-to-side movement, absolutely no switch grinding whatsoever. The tolerances are overall great and I don't have any complaints. In terms of weight, my unit comes in at around 59 grams with the stock skates installed, and comparing that to my FK2 DW unit over here, which is around 65.4 grams, it's a total difference of around 6.7 grams, so the weight difference is absolutely noticeable. And talking about weight balance, I yet again have no complaints. The mouse is perfectly balanced at the center of the mouse. I do not feel like there's any part of the mouse that feels heavier than the other, and they've just overall done a pretty good job. And now finally getting into the shaping comparisons, it's an FK2 with some slight changes. As I've already mentioned in the intro, Sanver is a co-owner of Vaxi, who back then at Zowie was pretty much the guy behind designing shapes of their mice. When matching them up side by side, you can actually see that it's ever so slightly shorter now. In terms of the curvature, it's overall a bit more safe now. It's not as much of an hourglass, and the center hump is ever so slightly taller. I also do feel like the hump upwards towards the top feels a tiny bit more wide, so I have more support here for my Pincer claw grip. So over here on the right side, I do feel like there's a bigger surface area that kind of sticks out. And that's pretty much all for the differences. The absolute main part I want you to take away from this comparison is that the front is definitely more narrow towards the front compared to the FK2, and that especially people who play a relaxed type of claw grip might feel like the mouse is a bit shorter because the overall length isn't the same. I do feel like the design is pretty much an upgrade for those people who do want a tiny bit of support, even though the mouse is so flat, but overall it's not drastically different. It is sort of reimagined with some slight tweaks. If you do not know what the FK2 is like and you have never seen a shape like this, here's a comparison to the Viper V3 Pro, for example, and with the Viper being more of a flatter shape compared to a lot of mice on the market, the FS1 is even flatter. It is such a flat shape in general, and it is very different compared to almost any symmetrical mouse on the market. Here it is compared to a Super Strike, for example, and as you can see, the FS1 is just so much flatter. With the shape being so flat, you might be asking yourself, what is it actually good for? Well, first of all, I can recommend it for any hand size in terms of a fingertip grip because the sides are a bit on the flatter side. And you can still get some leverage here with your pinky finger down towards the rear where it actually flares out a bit. And it is a very maneuverable type of shape because it is so flat and there is no real hump that goes in and distracts you from moving your mouse around. I do want to mention that if you play any type of palm grip, I would never buy this mouse because it is so flat. But if you play any type of claw grip and you simply want less support and you're tired of those big humped mice for claw grips, this mouse definitely does work for that, and a lot of people who do play especially a pincer claw grip where they have support here on the right side, they feel like they can kind of tilt their hand more forwards and play more naturally with this type of shape. For me and my personal likings, I do not vibe with this type of shape anymore, unfortunately. And I could never get 100% comfortable with my aim just because the mouse is so flat, and I personally do not enjoy it. But for those people who really want a flatter type of mouse, it is definitely an amazing shape to try out. In terms of hand sizes and recommendations, if your hands are around 19 centimeters, this is what a relaxed type of claw grip is going to look like. I definitely over grip the mouse, so I would probably not recommend it for 19 centimeters and a relaxed claw grip, probably more like 18 centimeters and below. For an aggressive claw grip, you can absolutely use this with 19 by 10 centimeter hands or even bigger. Here's what it looks like for me and my grip. I definitely do have enough space on the right side, on the top, and my thumb also perfectly aligns between the side buttons. In terms of sensor position, we'll talk about that later in the video. And as a final note, there are no comfort grooves, so please keep that in mind if you loved that over on the FK2. The benefit of that is that you can position your fingers wherever you want and the mouse doesn't dictate you for where they should actually be. And getting right into the coating, it is awesome if you have drier or not ultra sweaty and wet hands. It is quite the rubbery coating, but it's also not pure rubber. It does feel a tiny bit chalky. It is easily just as grippy as a DW coating here from Saui. With my very dry and cold hands, I didn't have any issues gripping it whatsoever, but if you have ultra sweaty and oily hands, I definitely recommend picking up some grip tape. A great recommendation here would be the Cicada Wings grip tape from X-Ray Pad. The skates they have included remind me a lot of Magic Eye skates from Unusual Wastesports, and if you've at all been following me on Twitter or know anything about me and skates, these are pretty much my favorite skates of all time. They don't degrade too much over time and they stay very consistent, especially compared to other very speedy skates, but don't expect these to be blazingly fast. They're definitely quick, but not insanely fast. They do have ridges around the skates, which is a huge negative in my personal opinion, because if you use this mouse on very soft mouse pads, like an Artisan X Soft or even a Soft, if you press into your pad, you will feel these ridges. I simply do not understand why they have done this, especially because it is not a thing over on Vaxi's own mice, so I guess Pulsar pretty much just gaslit them into doing it. Talking about gaslighting, this mouse can only be turned on and off with this one single button and you need to hold it, and it is freaking annoying and I hate whenever mice does this. It's the same as the Viper, for example, and every single time you want to turn it on or off, you need to hold the button, check the indicator light and make sure it's actually on or off or not. But on the Viper V4 Pro, it's not so much of an issue because this mouse pretty much loses no battery on standby, and the battery can even last up to 180 hours on 1K. But if you use this mouse on turbo mode, which we'll get into later, you're pretty much gonna wake up to a dead mouse. In terms of the buttons, this now uses Pulsar's own optical switches just like the Saiwu or any other newer Pulsar mouse. The implementation here is actually insanely good considering that it's an optical switch. There is a very minimal pre-travel and the post-travel feels very nicely tolerated. It does get quite excessive if you click towards the very front of the mouse where you get this springboard effect, but if you don't click towards the very front and anywhere else, it feels great. It's definitely a bit more of a tactile click, but you can definitely also spam it, but don't expect it to be super light. If you click towards the rear here of the mouse, it does get very tactile and very heavy, and anywhere from here and forwards it feels very usable. As I've already mentioned, there is little to no side-to-side movement and it feels very nice to play with. This side button I cannot press into the shell, but the rear one I definitely can tilt into the shell a tiny bit if I push it towards the rear, or even here towards the front I can also press it into the shell, but I really do not think that this is going to be anything that you're going to feel in-game, or at least I have not noticed so far. The pre-travel is minimal and the post-travel also is very tight. The side buttons aren't super light to click or actuate, but they're also not exceptionally heavy or anything like that. They're right down the middle. The scroll is metal with some knurling on top, and I will never understand why they would do this on an esports focused product where performance is everything. Because metal simply gets slippery whenever your hat gets more moist or has more oil in general. and you definitely do have to apply some pressure in order to scroll, because this is also not a light scroll. It is definitely more of a medium heavy scroll, which is not super easy to actuate and spam. As some feedback to Pulsar here, I would definitely recommend going for a slightly lighter scroll, and please just use normal rubber or even plastic scroll wheels with proper knurling. This to me is the only part of the mouse that doesn't feel esports grade. You can definitely feel the steps, but it's also not super tactile, and the scroll click movement is very tight and short, but it's definitely a bit on the heavier side. And as always, here's a sound test. Getting into the sensor position, if you don't know what it is and how it affects your aim, definitely check out the link down in the description below. Looking at the side of the mouse, you can see that the side buttons are pretty much in the center of where you're supposed to grip your mouse. And drawing a line from the center of the side buttons to the sensor, you can see that it is ever so slightly forward shifted, because what it's tracking is actually this dot here towards the front. And when I grip it and put the thumb where it's supposed to go, you can see that the sensor is ever so slightly shifted forwards, which is a very nice position to be in. Getting into the battery life without turbo mode turned on, which we're going to talk about in the software right in a second, this mouse pretty much lasts me anywhere from 4 to 5 days. And that is with 2K polling, so yeah, the battery life is nothing special. And when turning turbo mode on and using it on 2K polling, I get no more than 12 hours of gameplay. It is that bad. I really wish Pulsar made their own firmware and didn't just use compacts at this point, especially with the 20k FPS scanning and also new mice coming out like the Viper V4 Pro with FrameSync. But then again, that's going to be proprietary to them and their sensor that they're using for the next 1.5 years. So the only thing that you could do at this point is just make your own firmware and do your own battery optimizations. If you do not like plugging in your mouse a lot, don't get this mouse, but if you don't mind charging it every other day, you're fine. Getting to the software, you can find it at the link down in the description below. On the homepage, you can not only see your battery life, but also all of your settings at a glance. On the customize page, you can change your profiles and set up different types of keybinds. You cannot customize the DPI button underneath, probably because it's going to be used for turning the mouse on and off as well. Here are all the possibilities of the keybinds on the left side. On the performance tab, they still do not have XY DPI split, but you can set the number of DPI stages here on the right side. Here you can change your DPI, and you can also change the color of your profile. But unfortunately, the color does not apply to the receiver as well, so Pulsar, please fix. The only LED changes that you can do is 0.7, 1mm, and 2mm. And by default, on the 1mm setting, the LED is quite low. When putting it to the 0.7mm setting, the mouse pretty much stops tracking whenever I lift it from my mousepad in an instant. And the 2mm setting feels a bit more conventional, so overall the LED is calibrated a tiny bit low in my opinion. Polling rate goes up to 8k Hz, you can do sensor rotation down here, and if you don't know how this works or affects your aim, check out the link in the description below. And over here you can turn off motion sync, anything else, and also here's the turbo mode, which will enable constant 20k FPS scanning and will drain your battery like crazy. For the debounce time, I'd recommend a setting of 0 milliseconds since we're talking about optical switches here. You can also set up macros in the macro tab as always. And over in the power and dongle settings, I'd recommend turning the low power mode down to 0% so that you're always at your max performance. And for the receiver, I can recommend setting the turbo mode to the left button so that you can either turn turbo mode on or off, whether you're in game or you're just filling out Excel spreadsheets. The mouse will also flash in red once you're at 15% battery or less. And over in the last tab, you can update your firmware, which I would definitely recommend you checking if there's a new version available before using the mouse in-game. There is also a new firmware coming out soon, but that is not available for this mouse yet. And that's all for the WebDriver. In terms of value, since I got the mouse shipped out by Max Gaming, I do want to give them a quick shout out here. Especially if you live inside of a country in the EU, I can definitely recommend checking them out. And if you're from Scandinavia, it's an absolute no-brainer since they're based in Sweden. Coming in at a whopping 180 euros on their store, it does match the exact price of Pulsar's own EU store as well. And it also does come in at $180 US in the US. Let's be real for a second. 180 euros. That is a hefty amount of money. I do not feel like you're getting the tech innovation here like with the Viper V4 Pro, for example, or heck, even the Super Strike because of the hit system. You're just getting the Pulsar sensor that they've been using for the last 2 years. You're getting their same old MCU, and you're getting around 12 hours of battery life on turbo mode. And you're also getting Pulsar's optical switches, which not a lot of people are huge fans of. Then it's also very hit or miss whether you like the scroll wheel or not, because it can get slippery, especially if you have very sweaty hands. So overall, I just don't fully agree with the price point. It is definitely an expensive mouse, and if you really wanted a remastered version of the FK2, I do feel like this is a great product. The engineering of the internal design is awesome, the receiver is great, the coding is awesome, the clicks do feel great, and it definitely does feel like a VAXI product besides the skate ridges and the metal scroll wheel, but I just feel like there's something missing. If you've always wanted a fingertip grip style VAXI mouse, I can definitely recommend this thing, especially since it's one of the only proper esports focused products that works very well with a fingertip grip by having absolutely no hump being in your way from moving your mouse around inside of your hand. But for anyone else, it's gonna be very hit or miss, and you kind of need to know if you actually do enjoy using shapes this flat. Besides that, I also do quickly want to talk about the VAXI PD170 that I have on my desk here. It is pretty much a silicone laminate mouse pad with 0 edges. They have this rounded design all around, and the base beneath is insanely sticky. So unlike pretty much any other hard pad on the market, this one does not slip around on your desk. Especially artisan mid pads are very known for sliding around because they are a firm pour-on base, but this one just absolutely sticks. The base itself is rock hard. You pretty much cannot press into it, and because of that, the overall aiming experience is incredibly consistent. And if you have never tried a hard base on a cloth pad, I can absolutely recommend checking it out if you are in the market for it and if you can comfortably afford it. The overall speed of this mouse pad is quite fast. It is not as hovery as something like a Raiden Mid or a PMM S2P Quantum Edition, for example, but it is definitely almost up there. It is a very speedy pad, and I'd almost think of it as pretty much the fastest balance pad that I've ever tried. It doesn't feel uncontrollable, you still can stop your mouse and flick, but I don't know what it is. It is just not mainable for me enough, and I think it is because the mouse pad is insanely smooth. There's almost no texture to it. So me personally, I kind of have a bit of a lack of feedback, and I think that might be the only reason why I personally cannot main this mousepad. Other than that, I would say that quality wise, and especially in terms of consistency, this is one of, if not the best mousepads that have ever released. We almost have no super firm or like almost rock hard cloth pads, and I love that we're starting to see more and more pads in this type of segment. Just keep in mind, because this is a synthetic fiber pad, if you use 100% PTFE skates in a drier environment, let's say 45% humidity and below, when pressing your mouse slightly into the pad and drawing circles, you can feel the static buildup, which kind of feels like a scratching underneath your mouse skates. I personally don't notice it in game because I don't press into my mouse pad that much, but I just wanted to mention it to you guys who live in very dry environments, especially countries like Finland, for example. It's a very good mouse, it's just very expensive, but overall a great step in the right direction for Pulsar and their ES lineup. It definitely feels more like a VAXI mouse, but you do get the Pulsar hints, just like the scroll wheel, for example, and some other stuff that I do not personally love. The receiver is freaking awesome though, and I love to see some functionality in a receiver that is not absurdly huge, but that's about all I have to say. I am stoked that VAXI are collabing with Pulsar for these type of products, because at the end of the day, the more options we get as consumers, the better. That's about it for this video though. Definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in mouse reviews or Hall effect keyboard reviews. If you're looking for any products that I have on my desk, definitely check out the description down below because I have it all listed, especially because freaking everyone keeps asking me about this cable. And I'll see you guys pretty soon. Peace out.